In this video, we're going to be talking all about Epic Warpath with one of the game designers, Matt Gilbert. So a little bit unusual for this channel to be having an interview, but Mantic very kindly sent Matt my way to have a chat about some of the interesting features in the game. Hi, Matt.
Hiya. Hi, everyone.
Hi, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. So yeah, we're going to ask you a few questions about the game. Mostly these are going to be questions focused around the things that people who watch my channel generally want to know. So things like army builds and playing the game and rules balance and that kind of stuff, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
So if you haven't looked at Epic Warpath yet, please go and take a look at the Kickstarter. Looks really good. I'm really excited for it. I think it's going to be great. There's loads of info on there about rules. There's battle reports on there as well. There's plenty of info on the game on the Kickstarter. So I'm going to try and ask Matt some of the stuff that isn't being shown on the Kickstarter, really, to get you guys a little bit more information. Now, the game is still in development, so there's still some changes going on, still some balancing going on and that kind of stuff. So I guess we don't take anything you say as 100% gospel at this point, Matt. But, we'll obviously get a good flavour of how things are going and how the things differ to other games that we might play as well and the way other companies do things. Yeah. So, first of all, one of the questions I've seen asked quite a lot on the Kickstarter and other places is what is an average army going to look like in Warpath, in Epic Warpath? How many models, how many tanks?
Well, it's a good question. I guess it obviously depends on play style. So we've tried to make the game kind of combined arms, but no real restrictions if you want to go in a particular direction. The core plastic that we've put in place for each army, it gives you probably roughly 2,000 points, which is a good spread. It'll fill and play on a 6x4. So you haven't got half an army with your core plastic army. You've got something decent, and it'll be a mix of vehicles and infantry and heavy infantry and things like that. Certainly, if you have a look at the battle report that we put up, not the video one, but the kind of the slides, the classic White Dwarf style.
Yeah.
Remember, battle report, it give you a good flavour of an army, a couple of armies that we picked, one for the Enforcers, one for the Plague, which are with a good mix of units. The Plague had some monsters and some flyers and some, and their chaff units and their artillery and stuff. And the Enforcers also had their own interceptors and their, the normal Enforcers. They're good, the tanks that they've got. So a good combined arms. But the way that armies are constructed, we've gone quite light on the following how Dead Zone and Firefight, or other games in the same universe, how they do army or force construction. It's quite a light force organisation chart. So it kind of focused it around companies. So, but once you've constructed that company, that purely exists for building your army. In game, at the moment, I'm not expecting you to have to keep that company together or anything like that. You don't have to keep track of it. So it's purely for the unlocks of various things. So within a company, if you start a company, you have to have a commander and 2 troops. After that, for every up to 4 troops, for every troop you can have a specialist, and then for every 2 troops and or specialists you can take a support.
Right.
So actually, you can fill out a whole company with a commander, 4 support, 4 specialists, 4 troops. And if you want to take a super heavy, it's 1 per company, and they take up 2 support slots. It's quite simple, and that's it. That doesn't get any more complicated than that. So it's quite simple.
Yeah.
So within that, obviously within your army, depending on what's in each slot type, will depend on how heavy you can go with tanks or anything like that.
So we take some troops, they're your normal style infantry. Then we can take some specialists who are maybe things like sniper infantry or infantry with special weapons or something like that. And then the support slots are things like tanks. Is that roughly how it goes? Yeah,
roughly. It might be within some lists. It might be that you might find that some of your walkers are specialists. It might be that some of your maybe jet bikes are troops. There's not necessarily hard and fast. They might be different in different armies. So you might find that actually you can specialise more in a particular way with a particular army than others.
So it's very similar for people who've played Firefight. It's a very similar way of doing things. And I can say from having used that system, it's really good for stop and spam. but at the same time, giving you lots of options to take lots of cool toys if you want to, or to try to do a very tank heavy army, whilst also meaning that it's combined arms enough to still make the army interesting to play and play against. So that sounds really good to me. So on that topic of making the army interesting to play and play against, one of the things I was interested in is how the balance works within the game. So when we think about people who are maybe playing a bit more seriously and people who are playing a bit less seriously, trying to have games against each other, in some systems that's borderline impossible, because if someone's put any effort into their list at all, they'll roll over someone who's just took the fun stuff. How do you, outside of the army building system, or maybe that's how you do it, how do you make sure that your games are more fair in a game of Epic Warpath?
Well, I'd probably adopt the same kind of principle we do with any of our game systems. I mean, you try and do it within the army building structure itself, but obviously, whatever you do, people are going to immediately look at it and say, "Well, I can just do that then." So one of the things that I always do, one of the steps in playtesting is to go out to playtesters and say, we're not looking at this area this time, or I don't want you to look at this particular army. What I want you to do for the next 2 weeks is go and make the most horrific broken armies you can. Pretend you're just a win at all costs player. Tell me what's disgusting and what's broken. Prove it, and then we'll try and we'll try and course correct and adjust and take those extremes out. So, to kind of get it back down to a sort. And you don't want to make the game so sterile that no one's got any choice, but you don't want those extreme builds that someone just looks at it and turns up and says, "Well, I've lost then."
Yeah. And
I think destructive testing is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's something that, we can certainly see sometimes when we look at other games, feels like a thing that often gets missed is, why is this thing just so much better than this other thing? I would never take the other thing. Even if I'm a casual player, the numbers are so obviously in favour of this one, I'm never going to take the other one. So it's good to hear that that's been factored in. And again, in my experience, my small amount of experience playing Mantic games, that's generally really well done. There are better choices, I would say. A lot of the time you will look at things and say, okay, this one's a bit better. But a lot of the time it's not so much better that it precludes the other choice. And because of the way the army building works, a lot of the time you can't spam them anyway. So it's not really such a big deal.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we do that others perhaps don't is and you know this, that we have these rules committees for each game system. And they're usually formed when we're developing a game. It's the people who are the most invested in the play testing and who give the best feedback and the most constructive. We'll ask them if they want to become the rules committee for the game. And as well as being kind of the face in the community and stuff like that, they help us keep the game fresh, keep the game balanced. They're our kind of interface into the people who are then actually playing the game. Because obviously, we'll develop a game and stuff and we'll support it going onwards, but we've all got other jobs to do and stuff like that. So the people, the customers are the people who are actually playing the game. They're the people that really understand it. So it's great to have then a committee that sits alongside us who can give us that feedback and say, this isn't working, that's broken, the community are asking for this thing. And that helps keep the game balanced, and, then we can do the periodic updates to say, okay, here's this year's balances, because we know this meta's, it's gone this way, or these particular builds are now too powerful, or we took that bit too far. So it's great to have those people in there, and they'll help us with new units and balancing and repointing things. But it's really important to involve the community and the active player base in not just developing the game in the first place, but progressing it and supporting it going forwards.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. I think that's the thing I often see missed in a lot, because I own a game store, right? So I see a lot of games come through. I see a lot of enfranchised players for even smaller or more niche games come through. And what I often see is games will come out really good at the start, and as soon as they get to their first expansion, their first new book, whatever it is, all hell breaks loose, right? It's like that all the effort went into getting the game out the door, and it was really well balanced, and then ongoing, not so good. And I think that's where this approach of having the rules committee with those enfranchised players, the people who really care, who are going to events all the time, whether they're highly competitive or other events, keeping things going. I think that really makes a difference for the longevity of a game.
Yeah, absolutely.
That sounds great to me as a emergent Mantic fan. This is, all stuff I'm really happy to hear is being carried over from the other games as well. And I hope people listening find this stuff really interesting, because I think the way Mantic does these things is great. Just going to go and focus a little bit on Warpath itself now, just for the last question I've got. Again, all the rules for Warpath, such as they are today, are easy to go and read on the Kickstarter and the various links that are there. One of the things that's been talked about, though, is dynamic objectives. So, in my opinion, a lot of games I play, particularly competitively, the games are made or broken by how good their mission systems are. For me, there's a lot of great games out there with dull mission systems and they just get ruined, and there's some really bad games out there with great mission systems. Dynamic objectives, tell me a little bit about them and how they're going to work and make the game better.
So there are two flavors of objective then in Warpath at the moment. Static ones, which are in place, always on, so they're always available to score. And then the dynamic ones. So the objectives are, unless sometimes a scenario will tell you to place an objective in a particular way, but normally it's both sides are placing the objectives. Whichever type of objective it is, it's still got the same rules for putting it on the board. Not within 12 inches of another one, not within X inches of an edge, and all that sort of stuff. The dynamic ones, typically you toss them like a coin at the start, and they'll start either active or inactive, and they've got a green side and a red side. And then at the end of every round, they'll flip to their other side. Depending on the scenario, they'll either score or not score, depending on their active or inactive, or they might score less if for some reason. So they're not in all scenarios, I don't think. So I think quickly to talk about scenarios themselves, and this is going to sound daunting, and my playtesters are going to hate me for it, but I've got 4 scenario parameters and 4 types of scenario parameter and 4 parameters within each of those. So there's 4 ways that you can set up the board, deployment zones, 4 types of reserves, 4 types of objective placement and the types of objectives you have, and then 4 ways of scoring. So 4 times 4 times 4 times 4, that's a lot of things to playtest.
A lot of different ways to play the game as well.
Yeah.
And when you say scoring mechanisms, we're talking about, so a lot of Mantic games use like a concept of unit strength, which we've recently seen similarly in Legions Imperialis as well. So different units will be better at scoring objectives than others. Are there other different things that play into whether you score an objective as well?
So unit strength is something that we brought into Kings of War a long time ago, and I think then we brought it into Firefight as well, and it made sense to bring it into through into Warpath. So it's used for if 2 sides are trying to claim an objective, so it's used as the tie-break.
I mean, it all sounds really good. It sounds like the kind of stuff I like to play, certainly the kind of stuff other people I know like to play as well. What I really like as well is just how open you obviously are to saying, hey, I've got this system, but let's see what parts of it people like. And it's really just nice to hear what you said earlier about the community being involved in it as well, getting some of those most committed players involved and getting their feedback so early in the process.
We're hopefully unlocking the next armies. I've only got as far as creating some army lists based on their existing firefight units, plus making some new ones up. There's no models or concepts for these things yet. We're kind of almost throwing this out. Well, I throw it out to playtesters, throwing it out to the community in the Kickstarter and saying, the super heavies, what should they be? What should they, what do you want?
Yeah.
It's bringing the community, even in the development of the actual models and the units themselves, which is quite cool.
I mean, I think I'm super excited about it, Matt, to be honest. It's cool to see a game that's so heavily focused on what the community wants it to be. And that's one of the big reasons, I think, and I would encourage people to consider backing this, even if it's not a game you think you've maybe got room for. There's a lot in there that deserves people's attention. I would hope, with a little bit of info from you there, that was great. So thank you for going through all that and answering those questions. Hopefully after people listen to this, they think, that sounds like something I'd like to be involved in. I'd like to be a community playtester. Get back in the project. Go and check it out on Kickstarter. The next army to be unlocked, the GCPS, is the army I want. So please go back so I get my army. That'd be great. And if we get it really high, Matt's got to invent yet another army. So let's give Matt that job. I think that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, can't wait.
So Matt, thank you so much for coming on. Really interesting again. Go and check out Mantic's Epic Warpath starter. When this video comes out, it'll have about 4 or 5 days left to run. So there should be lots of stretch goals unlocked there. Really great prices, really great rules. As you can see, a really great company heavily focused on giving the community a game and supporting it going forward. Matt, see you again, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely.
And see you all soon, guys. Bye-bye.